So hi y'all, it's Shulamit. Okay, so today is not going to be your typical Shulamit. Well, I don't know, is there a typical Shulamit video? But anyway, it is going to be about the Holocaust. And what I've been learning is that people are forgetting the Holocaust, as strange as it sounds, and what I'm, when the whole virus thing started happening, I'm a child of a Holocaust survivor. My mom survived the Holocaust. I don't know if you can see me through the glare of these glasses, but hopefully you can. Anyway, so my mom survived the Holocaust, and she ran here when she was young through Cuba, which at the time she said was quite beautiful. Very, very rich country, was destroyed by Castro with his socialism. And of course, we're seeing that in our own country. Anyway, so at the beginning of the virus, my little Nazi spidey antennas were going crazy because I used to hear my mother crying out every night in her sleep. She was running from the Nazis. And as in many families who have dealt with Nazi survivors, people don't talk about it. That doesn't mean it's not transmitted. The virus is transmitted in the same way, actually, so it kind of makes sense. It's transmitted through cellular memory. So we know now that trauma can be transmitted through 4 generations and possibly even more. I know Native Americans talk about possibly 7 generations, and there has been experiments done in the laboratory with white rats that showed that it once traumatized in the mother, the babies come out traumatized. And if they stay in that environment, that gets transferred from generation to generation. And what they consider the ova of the sperm being transferring the trauma to 4 generations, maybe more. However, I know as an energetic healer and a clairsentient about frequencies, and I know that that's being transferred through cellular memory, through the morphogenetic field. You can learn more about that by looking up Rupert Sheldrake's work. And so that trauma got transferred to me, and it has gotten transferred to all first generation Nazi Holocaust survivors. And so we're carrying that information. And because we're carrying that information, we're sensitized to it. So I started having my Nazi antennas pinging like crazy at the beginning of the virus, and I have been seeing the extermination. I have been seeing the media takeover. I have been seeing the neighbors who have been incited against their own neighbors for a play date. I have been seeing so many of the hallmarks of Nazism that was just actually set up as the Democratic Socialist Party. That people think Nazi is like some special word, but actually that's what's going on in our government right now. You can call it by a different word. You can call it by radical Democrat, socialist, leftists. You can say socialists. You could say, whatever it is you want to say, but it's all the same thing. It's all the same mentality. Okay, so having said that, I heard that that people were starting to forget that the Holocaust happened, and that must never, ever, ever happen, because that's the reason why it can happen again. And it's starting to happen now with the mass vaccinations and Geert Vanden Bosch's agonizing scream to halt all of the vaccinations in the whole world because of creating variants. And I've already done a video about that. Okay, so you can look on my channel. So some horrifying facts, and I'm sure there's more. Almost 2/3 of millennials, Gen Z, don't know that 6 million Jews were killed in the Holocaust, survey finds. This is from the USA Today. Almost 2/3 of millennials and Gen Zers don't know that 6 million Jews were killed in the Holocaust, and almost half can't name a single concentration camp. An alarming new survey on Holocaust knowledge has found. The survey demonstrated wide gaps in younger Americans' knowledge of the genocide, while also showing a concerning 15% of millennials and Gen Zers, though holding neo-Nazi views was acceptable. So hear that again. The survey demonstrated wide gaps in younger Americans' knowledge of the genocide. Are we surprised? Because look at what's happening in our schools. Our histories of our own country are being erased and transplanted with the 1619 Project, which is going to create a history that never existed, but that serves the party rhetoric. The survey demonstrated wide gaps in younger Americans' knowledge of the genocide, while also showing a concerning 15% of millennials and Gen Zers holding neo-Nazi views was acceptable. That's how it starts, right? How much of that is based on genuine understanding of neo-Nazi principles and how much is based on ignorance is hard to tell. Either of them is very disturbing, said Gideon Taylor, president of the Conference on Jewish Material Claims Against Germany, which commissioned the survey. If people can't name Auschwitz, that's something that's deeply concerning. I don't think there is any greater symbol of man's depravity in recent history than Auschwitz, he added. The survey is the fifth in a series that looks at people's knowledge of the Holocaust history worldwide, as well as education around the genocide. 2018 survey on Holocaust Remembrance Day, a reminder that we're forgetting the world's worst genocide. We are forgetting the world's worst genocide. We cannot allow that to happen. It will happen again if we allow that to happen. The survey of 1,000 18 to 39-year-olds in all 50 states also provided the first state-by-state breakdown of Holocaust knowledge in the U.S. in New York. For example, which ranked among the bottom 10 states in an analysis of Holocaust knowledge. Nearly 20% of millennials and Gen Zers incorrectly believe that Jews caused the Holocaust. Let's say that again. The survey of 1,000 18 to 39-year-olds in all 50 states, state-by-state breakdown of Holocaust knowledge in the U.S., ranked among the bottom 10 states in an analysis of Holocaust knowledge. Nearly 20% of millennials and Gen Zers incorrectly believe that Jews caused the Holocaust. Now just watch what's happening, because the pull down of statues, the Confederate statues, all the paintings that had any background with holding slavery, those are Democrats that started the KKK. They are Democrats that started Planned Parenthood. They are Democrats that are now wiping out history, supporting BLM, in erasing the background of what really happened in our country so as they can supplant another history there on which they can then incite the weakening of the foundation of our country. And this is what's happening with the Holocaust. Erasing it and changing it so that it will malign and vilify the Jews. That sort of denial and distortion around the causes of the Holocaust is a form of anti-Semitism, said Gretchen Skidmore, the director of education initiatives for the Levine Family Institute for Holocaust Education at the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. The results come amid a rise in an anti-Semitic incident around the U.S. in recent years. So there's a rise in anti-Semitic incidents that has been in our country. The Anti-Defamation League said in May that it had recorded an all-time high of anti-Semitic incidents in 2019 since its tracking of such events began in 1979. 75 years after Dachau, Holocaust survivor Ernie Gross shares a message of hope and forgiveness. Another concerning finding in the Claims Conference survey, so you can look that up if you want a message of hope and forgiveness 75 years after Dachau, but then look around and see what's happening. And don't lose sight of that. Don't become complacent. Become very, very concerned. Another concerning finding in the Claims Conference survey, almost half of respondents had seen social media posts denying or distorting facts about the Holocaust, and more than half said that they had seen Nazi symbols in their community or online. Now let's talk about the Nazi symbol, which we call the swastika. The swastika is actually an ancient symbol that they co-opted. The Nazis, well, more specifically Hitler, and the Nazis were all about the Aryan race. They developed and mythologized a certain story for themselves that they ran on, that there was the Aryan race, and they were the true Aryan race, the children of the Aryan race, and they took on the symbol of the swastika. Swastika actually is an ancient symbol, and in Hindu, and in Sanskrit, su means sweet, aste means he, she, or it is, right? Swastika, it is good, it is sweet, it is the sign of good fortune. And what they did was they co-opted it for themselves. And through anchoring, through a constant repetition, people started connecting, associating the swastika, which was of good fortune and had nothing to do, it was on Coca-Cola bottles, it was on many things, right? It's ancient. It is not only Hindu, there's Native American, I mean, it's ancient, right? And the Nazis took it on as their own, and they drenched it with blood and with massacre and with devastation, and they created an association, so it terrorized people. It certainly terrorized me as a child of a Holocaust survivor, and I was able to clear the terror of that through a process called emotional freedom techniques, which I am a master of, and I assist people in clearing trauma of all kinds. And it is a stunning process, and I suggest that everybody look on my channel to see EFT and learn about it, and I speak more about it, I teach it, and you can also call me anytime to ask me questions. Actually, I would say text me, because I don't hear my phone because it's robocalls. So, so text me, okay? And I'm more than happy to connect with you. Or you can also connect with me on Facebook. Okay, so another concerning finding is that almost half of respondents had seen social media posts denying or distorting facts about the Holocaust, and more than half said that they had seen Nazi symbols in their community or online. Taylor said these results demonstrate how the internet has given a voice to an amplified Holocaust denial in a way that was unimaginable just a few years ago. And interestingly enough, of course, Facebook calls that a hate symbol, and they will remove it, not really looking at the context of what's going on. Approximately 6 million Jews were killed during the Holocaust after Adolf Hitler, and the Nazi regime came to power in Germany in the 1930s. Jews and other groups were targeted by the Nazis and their allies on beliefs of perceived racial inferiority. So just notice what's happening now in inciting a white-black divide, and that the white male especially is considered to be the evil one and the inferior one all at the same time. So that women, and just recently a client of mine texted me totally heartbroken and said that his ex-wife, who he was in the process of a potential reconciliation, it was a biracial relationship, was told by her that she could not entertain connecting with him again, not because of his flaws, not because she doesn't love him, not because she's not attractive, but because he's white. No surprise that he's white. They have children together, and she knew he was white 20 years ago when they got together. But that's what's going on. And so the white male now is the new Jew, so to speak, and is being targeted, is being objectified, is being vilified, and will be the cause of a tremendous amount of heartache. It will be a second Holocaust, most probably. Okay, so approximately 6 million Jews were killed during the Holocaust after Adolf Hitler and Nazi regime came to power in Germany in the 1930s. Jews and other groups were targeted. Yes, anybody who was considered inferior, like somebody who was retarded or gays, anybody who was considered inferior or had the slightest bit of Jewish blood in them was considered inferior and dispensable, actually garbage. Jews and other groups were targeted by the Nazis and their allies on beliefs of perceived racial inferiority. Millions were sent to ghettos, labor camps, and concentration camps. So let's just talk about camps for a moment. The CDC, so again, remember I told you that there is a level that's going on in this, in the virus unfolding that is very reminiscent of Nazi mentality, Nazi behavior, and actually Nazi conditions. And so on the CDC site, you will find that there is something called the shielding plan, and that is to create camp sectors, and they call them camp sectors, away from the populace, where they can remove people that they consider vulnerable, whatever that means to them, to the virus, and they can remove them and keep them there for up to 6 months. And the whole idea is to keep them away from their family as much as possible, with the understanding that there will be psychological damage that happens and that they will be monitored for depression because of the isolation and so on. Of course, you know, these people don't give a damn about the isolation or the depression. The increase in suicide rate in children and in teens and in adults through the lockdown is something they don't give a damn about. If so, they would never have done the lockdown. These are not stupid people. These are not idiots. They are called idiots. They are called fools. They are called jerks. Don't dismiss them that way. They know exactly what they're doing. These are people that were trained by the Project Paperclip that put ex-Nazis in on science, academics, entertainment, and media. These are expert propagandists, and they have been propagandizing for decades through the media. And now they want to take over the media completely so that they own what goes on into our minds and our children's minds. So this is exactly what the Nazis did. Also going into the churches, making the churches now sites for vaccination and saying things like, if Jesus was born and lived today, he would take the vaccine. And that the vaccination is actually medicine from God. So the churches are becoming centers that deify the whole vaccination process, right? So when Hitler was taking over, he went in and he invaded the churches with ideas, and he Nazified the churches. And this is exactly what's happening. According to the Southern Poverty Law Center, neo-Nazi groups in the U.S. today share an affinity for Hitler and Nazi fascist political ideology, while also focusing on hatred toward Jews and minority groups. Neo-Nazi groups in the U.S. share an affinity for Hitler and Nazi fascist political ideology, while also focusing on hatred towards Jews and minority groups. Past surveys from the Claims Conference found similar gaps in knowledge around the Holocaust for Americans of all ages, as well as in people in all other countries like Austria. Austria, imagine that. Austria, also going through that. In a 2018 survey, almost a third of Americans incorrectly believe 2 million or fewer Jewish people died in the Holocaust. More than 40% of respondents in that survey also could not identify Auschwitz. Imagine. One of the biggest areas of atrocities in the history of the planet, and it's not being taught about. Do you think that's accidental? It's not. It's completely by design. Completely by design. More than 40% of respondents in that survey also could not identify Auschwitz, the notorious concentration camp located in Germany-occupied Poland. In order to understand the importance of this history, there are certain fundamental aspects of it that you need to understand, Skidmore said. Knowing the basic facts allow people to then go to the next level and think critically about the causes and other enduring questions, she answered. See, if people don't have facts, they can't really think for themselves. Because they're going to use the distortions that they get, and they're going to base their understandings on lies. And then they will fight to protect their stance. They won't be capable of critical thinking. And critical thinking is one of the greatest enemies of the party that is in charge now. Critical thinking is not allowed. Taylor said that the state-by-state data in this year's survey will prove valuable for individual states where they can be more targeted changes to how educators teach Holocaust history. The survey found that 8 in 10 respondents believe continued Holocaust education is important to prevent it from happening again. That education becomes all the more important, Taylor noted, as fewer Holocaust survivors are still living. And this is exactly why I created this video series. And it's going to be a series because I'm going to be reading the memoirs of my grandfather, which in Yiddish we say my ziede. And Yiddish is the language that allowed Jews to be able to practice our practices without being found out and killed for it. Survey found that 8 in 10 respondents believe continued Holocaust education is important to prevent it from happening again. And notice that it actually is being erased from the school system. The education becomes all the more important as fewer Holocaust survivors are still living. On the one hand, you have this very worrying lack of knowledge, but on the other hand, you see this hunger to learn. We have to keep this hunger alive. We must keep this hunger alive. When I was younger, aside from hearing my mother cry every night, which apparently went on actually almost for the whole of her life, because for the last 6 years of her life, she was bedbound with severe Parkinson's. And the woman that took care of her said that she would hear her every once in a while at night still scream out. But my mother was not able to speak that loud anymore because it had affected her throat. And there were times where she was running so hard from the Nazis that she jumped out of bed. She threw herself, not jumped, she threw herself, she found herself thrown out of bed. I guess she never shared any of that with me. She did tell me that when she was running from the Nazis, they hid in haylofts and they had to beg for bread. And that deeply affected me and created inside me, as maybe it has some of you who are also Holocaust survivors, generations of Holocaust survivors, a sense of scarcity and a sense of, from that place of scarcity, a sense of hoarding. And for me, it involved food. It was about feeling a fear of starving that I didn't realize that I had downloaded from my mother. And again, thank God for EFT that I was able to clear that. But in the process, I was confronted by that being from my mother's Nazi background and how I had downloaded the terror. And that's where the swastika, which is really the Hakenkreuz, I wish we wouldn't call it swastika anymore. I did a piece of art around that called Healing and Reclaiming the Swastika and bringing it back to what it once was, which is a sign of good fortune. And it wasn't until I had cleared all the terror of it for myself, the association, the information that I had in my field about that I stopped reacting and seeing the swastika as a symbol of terror. It is the Hakenkreuz. It is the Hakenkreuz. So I remember my aunt, it was my father's sister, my aunt, she had numbers on her arm. And I remember as a child looking at those numbers and asking my grandmother why she had her phone number on her arm. And I don't remember ever getting any kind of response about that. People didn't talk about it. Either it was too painful or they felt that if they did speak about it, and that they would be traumatizing the next generation, but they don't realize that the generation was already traumatized just by cellular memory. So I am very blessed to have the memoir written from my Bobby and Ziede, which is Grandma and Grandpa in Yiddish. And this is covering his Shoah escapes, years 1940 to 1948. So I just want to show that to you. This is my ziede, who I adored, who taught me Torah. I come from a very religious background, actually, the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And this is my grandmother, my Babi. And this is his memoir, which was written in Yiddish and translated. Memoir written by Baruch Rosenberg. I'm just going to start it, and then I'm going to see how far we get when it feels like this is a long enough video, and then I will continue. And you can watch the different series episodes of it as you are able to. This is a very, very precious document. And I wanted to share this with the world so it will never be forgotten. My son is always telling me that once you put something out on the net, it's there forever. Actually, we've learned that that's not true. My first video that read an article about a response to vaccination was taken off before I even knew it was there. So my mother was born in Belgium, in Antwerp, and my Babi and Ziede were Hungarian. Okay, so this is, so they were living in Antwerp. Antwerp, Friday, May 10th, 1940. My family suddenly woke from sleep from the fearful bomb explosions and noisy artillery shots. They ran to the windows to see what was happening. We observed about 40 German aircraft circling the nearby airport, dropping bombs, sowing destruction on peaceful people. Imagine our fright in our living near the airport, sirens continuously shrieking in alarm. Suddenly, all was silent. My wife busied with preparing for the Shabbat. That is the Sabbath, for people who don't know what that is. It is the seventh day, and it is the day that Jews were given the commandment to rest, and it is a very, very beautiful, beautiful time of the week. Very sacred for those who observe it. My wife busied with preparing for the Shabbat. Later, we took the Shabbat food. We had prepared a few essentials, and with the children departed to my brother-in-law's, Meir Shalom, that's his name, house in the city. It was too great a risk to remain near the airport. In a time of tribulations, one wants to be with one's kin, because one does not know what the day will bring. How true that is today, how we've all been isolated and kept from our children and our family. How painful that has been. How frightening, because we never know what the next day was going to bring. This is exactly what he was going through, except at a level much more intense. Our arrival at my brother-in-law's house gave my sister-in-law little joy. The Holy Shabbat passed in fear for our future. The worry of what will happen further nagged in our brain. Sunday, we began preparing for flight to run from the Malach Hamavet. Malach means the angel, Hamavet means death, that call themselves Germans. Yamach Shemam, may their name be erased. From the radio broadcast, one hears that the Hitler troops are continuously advancing. 2 days later, my brother-in-law and sister-in-law took flight to La Panne, 3 miles to the French border. Next day, my family, Moshe Fixler and family, my father and mother-in-law, Baruch Weber and family, Shuli Zebinson and family, Shuli was the son of Abigail, who died at age 28, sister to my mother. My mother, Zichrona Libracha, may her memory be for blessing. I am reading this actually exactly, so some of that you may not understand is fine. I'm continuing. If, however, any of you happen to be my relatives or know these people, please reach out. My brother-in-law, Gutman, and family, we all hit the road. Whoever could grabbed a train in the direction of France. My family arrived at a small village by the sea. I found them the next day. My Bil Meir Shalom had the previous day gone back to Antwerp and did not return that day. This must be brother-in-law. Yeah, so I will say that. My brother-in-law, Meir Shalom, had the previous day gone back to Antwerp and did not return that day. Thus my sister-in-law screamed that we should go and search for him. With my brother-in-law, Baruch Weber, we traveled back to Antwerp, but we could not find him. We were told that he had returned back to La Panne. There were no trains going in direction of Ostend. We talked our way into a car and arrived in Ostend at night. Alighting from the car, a German airplane bombed near a house into which we had entered. Sheltering from the bombs, noticing my beard, I was looked upon as a spy. My brother-in-law and I were forthwith led into a room that was a military command post and interrogated. With my identity card and knowledge of different Antwerp streets, we were believed that we were residents of Antwerp. We passed the night in that house amongst a multitude of Goyim, which is not a denigration, it just means non-Jews. Actually, Goy means nation. The way we were scrutinized from top to bottom, many of them were no kinder to Jews than the Germans. In the morning, we journeyed to our families. They were no longer there. We were told that they had moved to La Panne to be closer to the French frontier. We went into La Panne and found them right away. It is not important to describe how we survived the few days in La Panne. With 100 families in one hall, the toilets were plugged up. Nature's call had to be alleviated in the yard, seen by everyone. You can imagine the lack of hygiene. We rushed for the frontier. We crossed into France. The whole family gathered and started to walk. But where to? We did not know. We fled as far as we could from the Hitler hordes. We had a wagon on 2 car tires, loaded with the most essential baggage and 2 nursing babies. Nisi Weber's boy, Yidela, and Shuli's, Mordkala, almost 1 year old. From time to time, my mother-in-law, Hindi, climbed aboard because of her painful legs. She could not endure the march. Switching, my mother, may she rest in peace, occasionally rode the cart. She too was a weak person. Children walked behind the wagon. Here and there a child would steal a ride on the cart until the exhausted horses, the men pulling and pushing, protested. Mostly the men did the pulling alternately. Altogether we were a large group. I, Moshe Fixler, Shuli, Baruch Weber, and my older sons, Yidel, Yankel, and Chaim Meyer. We were all harnessed to the wagon. Our caravan comprised of 6 men, 6 women, and 19 children. The roads were swamped by thousands of refugees, leading children in carriages, some loaded with packages and backpacks. We marched onward without a destination, not knowing the right road to take. Many times we were sent back because the Hitler hordes had already cut the roads. Thus we walked for several days until we arrived near Dunkirk. We were quartered in a room by the port. Night fell. No sooner had we slumbered that German aircraft bombing began. Continuous thundering lasted most of the night. We passed the night in fear and terror. The small children cried. There was not a bit of milk to still the baby's hunger. As soon as it dawned, we continued walking without any plan. Thus we walked, sometimes spending nights in barns. In a small village, the owner of a farm asked us who we were. We answered that we were from Belgium. He shrugged his shoulders and said, such Flemishers he had never come across. Continuing, dragging ourselves with the wagon in a small village, we found Mayor Shalom and my sister-in-law. They distanced themselves from our caravan. They had their motives for not wanting to join us. We passed the night there. In the morning, at our farewells, a confrontation erupted between my wife and my brother-in-law, Mayor Shalom. He had hired a truck, took auntie and uncle, Hindi and Shaul Aryeh, and departed. Unfortunately, at that time, there lacked the family love and brotherhood that should have ruled at that moment. We were sure that my brother-in-law would tear himself away from Hitler and arrive at a peaceful place. Thus we walked on the highway and ran across a Hitler patrol. We realized that our flight was in vain. We straggled into a village and settled in. Next day, the women conferred and decided that the men should make an effort to travel deeper into France, to an area where the Germans had not yet penetrated. After a few nights, each one loaded his pack on his shoulders and left. Midway, the rains fell, but we walked on. We were 6 men in addition to my elder sons, Yidel, Yankel, Chameir. Heavy-hearted, saying goodbyes, we left the women and children behind. We walked. You can readily imagine what the women felt. After a few nights, each one loaded his pack on his shoulders and left. Midway, the rains fell, but we walked on. We were 6 men in addition to my older sons. We covered a great distance. Shuli carrying his small daughter on his shoulders, and his boy followed. After walking a few hours, we realized that our exertion was not succeeding. We could not break through to arrive into a safe place. We counseled and agreed that each should return to one's spouse and children. There was great joy and happiness by our wives on returning from our foray. They had not yet wiped their eyes from the tears they shed from their foolishness of letting their men go off on their own at such a distressing moment. Soon everything was as before. Each to his camp and each to his flag. But the earth under our feet burned for the morrow, for Jews in general and for us in particular. Each one of us sheltered in wherever we could. Esther found at a French woman 2 small rooms for our family. She cooked vegetable soup for us, mostly of beans. She had no plates, so for the children she poured out the dry beans on the table, and thus they ate. Esther is my grandmother, is my Bobby. This is my Ziede's wife, the woman that I showed you. We were lucky that in this village one could buy enough bread, milk, and cheese. One morning a tumult broke out among the village goyim. in that a spy had been caught amongst us, a parachutist with radio equipment. His lips had been moving, and he had obviously passed on secrets to the German enemy. This turned out to be no other than our Sholem, a Rosenberg cousin, wearing talit and tefillin. And that is I don't want to say the name wrong actually, but it is the box on the ritual garb that is put on in observing Jews. The long tassels. Everything has its reason. Okay, so a few Frenchmen pulled on his beard to make sure it was not glued on. He was then prodded to the command post. He was held for a while till we explained to them that the radio and parachute were religious items used during prayer. Thus they freed him. We remained in that village for about 10 days. An order had been issued that refugees must return home. During those days, the whole battle at Dunkirk played itself out. Leaving the village on our way home, a German soldier told us that Mussolini had joined Hitler in the battle against France and England. On hearing this news, our hearts became gloomy. England had recrossed the canal, leaving behind heavy artillery and ammunitions which we encountered and saw on the roads. France had become moribund, ready to exhale her soul. The German soldier also said that we, good Jews, will not be bothered. He consoled us with bitter feebleness. We felt the Jewish horizon was being covered by black clouds, which accompanied us on struggling our way home. On the road, German soldiers filled our caravan. Midway, we encountered a German military truck that stopped and asked if we would like to ride with him to Antwerp. We seized his offer. Our whole host, including our wagon, we squeezed into the truck. He let us off at Antwerp, and each one of us went to our own homes. From here on, a new chapter started. Food was only apportioned with ration cards. Half one had to provide for oneself from a reserve of food. For then and the coming year of hunger, which we foresaw, I provided myself with some maize, a bit of barley, which was not yet rationed, some chickpeas mixed, and maize, the feed one gives to pigeons. I'm going to stop here so that we can continue into a next episode. So this won't be an overly long video. And I will recap by reading some of what I've already read into the next episode so that you know where we ended off. I will see you soon. Bye-bye.